My man! Welcome to the show. How are you? Really excited as a parent and as a person of color to have our guest today. Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey guys, what's up? It's Irfan. I'm really excited to have our next guest on the show for a multitude of reasons. She is the founder and CEO of TRC Agency. I'm going to have her explain what she does. There's a lot to unpack here today. Hilary Russell, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. And the reason why I'm excited, Hilary, is because from the moment I met you and we had that first conversation, you know how sometimes you're just drawn to people, like you just know that you click with them, and it's not because we're in the same industry or the same business, but it's like, you know what? I like her energy, I like her vibe, and we've discovered that philosophically, how we approach business, how we approach partnerships, how we approach clients in our work and our family even, are really similar. And we didn't even have to go into like lots of detail to unpack that stuff. It was just like, it just worked. I don't know if you feel the same, but if you could talk about that.
Yeah.
And talk about like how you started your journey, how you got to where you are today, because you're in a very enviable position. So let me turn it over to you,
Awesome.
and start gushing about how much I like you.
Well, yeah, first off, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And the feeling is mutual. I feel the exact same way. In fact, it is interesting. When we first connected, I had reached out to an individual on your team to ask about an affiliate link or a referral link so that, I could pass along the amazing service of Roosterly to the people that I know. And I was blown away that you were the person that jumped on the call with me as, the owner of the company. And I felt immediately that was honestly such a great testament of how you show up in business and how you show up, in terms of really prioritizing your customers and the clients and, the hundreds and thousands of people that you work with through Roosterly. I just thought it was so cool. But yeah, in terms of, my company and my journey, I'll start back to give a little bit of context. I started in the, digital marketing world really at a pretty young age, right? Fresh out of, I guess into early adolescence, right? And as a young adult. And one of my very first positions in, quote, the corporate world was a position where I was kind of trusted and handed over a pretty big responsibility that I didn't understand fully at the time, but looking back retrospectively was really the catalyst to, to where I am today. So I like to kind of, paint the picture with this story because it really does illustrate how the entire, journey has come about. But when I was about 21 years old, I had started with a corporate healthcare company. And the same month that they hired me for a pretty operational type position, it wasn't anything fancy, but the same month that they hired me, they acquired 2 e-commerce B2B businesses. Yeah. And the important part about that is that this company, to that point, had only been doing services in the B2C realm. So they were working directly with a consumer versus with other businesses and other entities. And I don't know what was going through the VP's mind at the time, but for whatever reason, they called me into the office and they said, "Hey, Hilary, we just acquired these 2 new B2B platforms, these 2, entities. And quite frankly, no one here at this company has done B2B sales before. You haven't either. Do you want to take a stab at it?" And so all of a sudden, I was responsible for multiple $1 million in revenue that needed to be acquired through either B2B sales or enterprise sales and digital marketing.
No pressure whatsoever.
Yeah, no pressure. No pressure. You don't know anything about this, but here's this responsibility. And I remember thinking that, I had an opportunity where I could either use the justified excuses of, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I'm not going to do a very good job, or I could choose to make the decision and do something absolutely incredible with it. And I figured, I've got nothing to lose. I literally had no career background up to that point. And so what I did is I got on LinkedIn and I looked for every single professional in that industry or in that realm that I could possibly find. And for about 2 months, I would sit down with them either at coffee or at lunch or over a Zoom call like this and just go through my list of questions for them of how I could do a better job. And it absolutely paid off. That year, we ended up doing $14 million with those two entities. So it absolutely paid off. But that really was my kind of baptism by fire experience into digital marketing, into, partnerships and enterprise sales and how to really go about things in this industry. So fast forward, 10 plus years. Today, I live in Salt Lake City, Utah with my wife and our 3-year-old little boy. And we've got a little girl on the way. She'll be born here in a couple of months. And I am the owner of an agency firm digital marketing firm that we serve clients all across the country and provide them with customized marketing solutions that are really designed around what their goals are. And I've also been privileged to create online training for other entrepreneurs who want to create their own marketing agencies and want to really take advantage of the digital world that we're living in and, create a better life for themselves through entrepreneurship. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Very cool. So listen, let's dive a little bit deeper. Was there a specific catalyst that led you to saying, you know what, I'm going to start my own agency? What was that period like?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. So in 2019, I had spent about 10 years, building a career in enterprise sales. I held a lot of different positions for companies in marketing, aspects. And then in 2019, the few years before that, leading up to it, I had actually been in a role where I was consulting with other agency owners to help them grow their business strategically. And so I honestly did things a little bit backwards that way, where I had worked with companies really one-on-one and got in the weeds deep to help them grow. But in 2019, I was going through a couple of different things personally, and I found out I was pregnant. And I was not in a relationship where, we would stay together. And so I found myself in the year 2019, pregnant, single, and the company that I was working for at the time found out that there were a lot of issues, but the financial team was not being fully honest. And they were in a month after month, $250,000 deficit that was increasing month after month. So they went out of business. So all of a sudden I was, pregnant, single, no job, living off savings. Just honestly, Irfan, it was like my rock bottom humbling moment, because everything that I had worked for, everything that I thought I was working towards was gone.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. It must be so hard to just get out of bed on not even, I don't even mean physically. It's like certainly physically. I remember my wife was pregnant with our first, and it was certainly hard, but just the strength it requires to have an excuse and a motivation to say, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and here's how I'm going to get out of this situation. Was there something in your background or the way you were raised or your parents or that led you to say, you know what, it is a bad situation, and I know running a business or starting a business is risky. 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. I think that's the stat that people quote often. what were some of the either the individuals or the people that you knew that kept you going? What was that process like? Because you could have just as easily said, you know what, I'm going to go work for Uber, or I'm
Yeah.
going to, a million other things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, honestly, what happened is in early 2020, so I had my little boy in January of 2020. And then we all know what happened, just a couple of months later, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And so again, I felt like I had this situation where I could absolutely just fall back on the excuses that were totally justified of like, oh, well, woe is me. All of this stuff is happening. I can just, the pandemic is here. I could live off of the checks that the government's sending, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But again, I had this inspiration, or this, for lack of better words, really, it was this like adrenaline and excitement around, I have an opportunity here to do something absolutely incredible. And why not take the experience that I have gained over the last 10 plus years and do something with it, right?
Okay.
Instead of falling back on these excuses, instead of being in a victim mentality, why don't I do something with it? And so I did. I put together my LLC and I started reaching out to people, and surprise, the pandemic was actually a great time to start an agency, or really any business. But, as far as individuals around me, my dad has always been an incredible source of motivation for me. He's a great mentor. In fact, he has been in partnership and enterprise sales as long as I can remember. So I, definitely have learned a lot from him. But going through all of those pieces, I would meet up with him for lunch or phone calls or things like that, and just kind of talk to him about what I was doing. And it was always, a lot of support, and a lot of the level of support of like, hey, whatever you decide to do, I'm right here behind you. I'm proud of you. I'm rooting you on. Right. And sometimes that's really all that we need is just hey, you're making good decisions for yourself. Trust yourself. Go forward with what your gut tells you.
That is amazing. I do think that having those people in our lives that are a rock that you can lean on, because there's certainly folks that are out there that are your friends that might tell you, oh gosh, that's crazy. Like, why would you want to do that of all things? It's like the worst thing that you can do, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe not necessarily using those words, but they're not necessarily going to be motivating you, saying, oh my gosh, let me introduce you to 10 people that I know that that you could crush it for. Okay, so you've got your dad on your corner. That's awesome. You set up your LLC. What is the next logical step? You're just going to start emailing random people saying, hey, my name is Hilary. I've got 10 years of enterprise sales experience. Why don't you sign up for SEO or Facebook ad, whatever, all the different things that services that you provide. What was the next step for you?
I really relied heavily on my background of sales, right? Of getting out there and getting into the weeds, and really took a similar approach to what I did in, when I was 20 years old, learning about the marketing world. I got on LinkedIn, I got on Facebook, I got on social media platforms, and I started reaching out to as many business owners as I could possibly contact. And mind you, at the time, I was working a full-time job to pay the bills, right? I had basically like come back from maternity leave, right? I was working a full-time job. And so I had about an hour during my lunch break, and then a couple of hours at the end of the day that I was reaching out to as many people as I possibly could. And within just a couple of months, I was able to quit that job and replace a six-figure income that I had before. But the funny part about this, and I mean, it wasn't funny at the time, but the funny part about this is I had started dating my now wife, and she was working full-time. And I came to her and I said, hey, look, I really believe in this business that I want to start. Can you please quit your job and I'll take care of everything. Just trust me. I'll take care of everything, but stay home with our little boy so that I can, focus on doing this. And like you said, Irfan, people coming and saying like, that's crazy. Don't do that. I had so much of that, so much of people, reaching out or saying like, hey, it's cool that you're doing this, but don't you think you should do something stable right now with the position your family's in, or the position you're in, or
Yeah.
the position of the economy right now, right? And I mean, she had family members reaching out too that were saying like, hey, we're really worried because like you just quit your job and you guys have been dating, but do you know this is going to work? So there was definitely a lot of uncertainty, a lot of that for sure.
Okay, so that is one of those, the way that you describe that, it's one of those instances where there's rationale, there's logic, there's the practical things to do,
Mm-hmm.
and even if there's people out there that have your best interests at heart, they'll say, hey, look, for these 5 very logical reasons, you shouldn't do this. Or they could be telling your wife, hey, you're dating, she has a son, you're entering into this relationship. This is like red flag central, right? Like, is
Yeah.
this really something that you want to be doing? And I think what's really remarkable is 2 things. Number one, that you had the conviction of knowing that you were going to make this work, right? Because success is not practical. Success, if it was that easy, right? Everyone would do it, everyone would be successful, and we wouldn't have any issues, right? But you had the conviction of knowing that this is the direction that I want to go in, and I am going to make this work. I'm going to make it a successful business to the extent, and I don't know you to be a narcissist, you have empathy, you care about other people, but you went to your now wife and you said, hey, listen, I feel so strongly about this that I think you should quit your job and do what's best for our now son so that I can help grow this business and I'll take care of everything. Just you watch. So that's a big deal. Another big deal is that she was on board with that and she thought, you know what? I believe her. I don't think she's bonkers. I think she can do it. I have faith in her. I trust her, and she's going to make that work. And so, whether that creates more adrenaline, whether that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, or that just creates added pressure to make things work, is it risky? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, in those situations, not listening to others and just knowing what you're made of makes all the difference. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Well, and I would say too, because like I will say during that, it sounds great, right? It sounds great. Like, wow, there was so much conviction. There was so much confidence in moving forward. It sounds like that. But really, the day to day, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And it was this feeling of knowing what was possible.
Yes.
But really, we hear of you got to burn the ships, right? And my ships had been burned. They had been absolutely burned down. And so in my mind, I thought, you know what? I can either do this and move forward and create, try to create something. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, we go back and we get jobs, or we go back and we do whatever. And
Right.
and that was kind of, my mindset with it. I'm super grateful for my wife because she was very supportive. It did take some convincing at the beginning there to say, no, I really think you should quit your job. Right. But she's always been very supportive and very, very incredible that way. But I would say though, I mean, especially for anybody listening, don't get me wrong, like the fear was there. It wasn't a matter of overcoming the fear. It was a matter of moving forward scared.
Moving forward in spite of the fear, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gosh. All right. So how long did it take you to land your first client?
I landed the first couple of clients that month. So that first month, yep, I had a couple of clients. And so what I did is like I said, I was reaching out to people on social media and I I came from the world of, enterprise sales, where anyone in that aspect, you've probably had a taste of cold calling, but the typical cold calling that I was used to doing before was 100 to 200 calls per day of rejection, right? And so reaching out to people over social media with this little, copy paste paragraph that I had put together was pretty easy for me to do in between the free time that I had, right? So I would just send it out to as many people as I possibly could. And then at the end of the day, follow up with anybody that had responded and, get on those conversations and try to close the deal.
And what type of engagements were these? Were these at the time, what service were you offering?
Yeah, at the time I was offering a baseline package of SEO,
Okay.
which was through, updated listings and citations through Yext. And then believe it's changed quite a bit, but I believe I was also doing a access to a CRM where I was offering email marketing and text message marketing to re-engage their database.
Wow. Okay. And so you were essentially offering services that you'd done yourself, tested on yourself with success, and saying, hey, if I could do this for myself and it works, I can do it for other people, right?
Exactly.
How many clients did it take for you to feel like you had a handle on things and you're like, okay, I can do this. I'm making enough money consistently?
Yeah, I would say it was about probably between 5 to 8 clients. At that point, I was pretty comfortable financially. It was covering the bills and then some a little bit. And so, I ended up quitting the funding source, the W-2 job that I had. But honestly, after growing, I realized that I was doing it the wrong way, where I was trying to bring on these clients and then do the fulfillment myself. So it was really at that point as well that I realized, okay, I need to also bring on someone that can help do this, that I can delegate this, this piece of it too. There were a lot of growing pains there as well, but I would say that it was probably around the 10,000 per month area.
Yep. And how did you go about? So, two questions there. So, as someone who's got an enterprise sales background and also a marketing background, and as a business owner, you got three things going on there. There's things that I'm sure you're naturally very adept at, that you're talented at, that you enjoy doing, that you can do in your sleep. And there's probably other aspects of running a business that require much more deliberation that you're not necessarily an expert at. And now you finally got about 10K coming in. How do you decide what to let go of and what to keep? And so that's number one. And then how did you hire your first person? Because if they're working for you as a contract employee and you're sort of this super freelancer, which is kind of, you're not really a CEO at that point. It's kind of like a title that doesn't, CEO is sometimes the goofiest title. Really, when I first started, I'm like, yeah, CEO. CEO of what? Your bedroom? Like CEO of your fake office? Because you don't really have very much revenue coming in. You don't have, a lot of these things coming in. I don't mean you specifically, I mean in general.
Yeah.
But when you finally hit that stage, how did you ensure that, okay, I'm going to hire someone to do X? How did you interview that person? And then how did you manage that person and still maintain the rest of the things that were required to keep your job humming along and grow your business?
Great question, by the way. And I'll share two things, because at the beginning, as I was learning that, I mean, there's no blueprint out there of how to be a business owner, right? How to do these things, how to grow your business. And so it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of trial and error. And so I'll share two things. One, what the experience was, and then second, I'll share what I've learned to be the better process of doing this. But very first, during that point, I realized that I needed to delegate, and really I needed to have someone start helping with the company like 2 months ago. Like I needed that ASAP, right? But the piece with that, and what I find with a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners, is that we end up finding someone or hiring someone too late, right? Because we don't take into account that it's going to take, I mean, even with a really solid training process or really solid onboarding process, it's still probably going to take them a couple of months to get comfortable enough to handle those tasks or to handle what it is that you're wanting. And so at the time, what I ended up doing is that I had reached out to local area and figured I would just hire someone part-time that was there local that could, be in person with me and that I could train. And I interviewed a couple of different individuals. I went through the process, met up with them in person and hired them. And it actually royally failed. that person ended up staying for about a month. And there were a lot of things that happened that it just was not a good fit. It was not a good fit at all. And actually, I took that very personally. I always remember, and even still, we hear that people don't quit bad jobs, they quit bad managers, right? And so I had that like ingrained in my head, and I was like, man, I did a bad job. I didn't do it the right way. I'm a bad manager. Do I even deserve to have a business? Like all of these things were going through my head. And it honestly took me probably about 6 months to get over that, which looking back, retrospectively was a hindrance for sure. Right. But finally, I was able to really, and I worked through it with a business coach that I had at the time, which I've always had a business coach. I really support that idea, right? But I worked through it with a business coach that I had and realized, like, you know what? This entrepreneurial journey, business ownership, it is just a journey of learning through trial and error. And there's no such thing as failure. It's either a success or a learning opportunity, right? Or both. And reframing that in my mind really made a big difference. And so about 6 months later, I looked at a different approach of, hiring individuals, team members, and delegating, and ended up hiring a VA out of Argentina, out of Buenos Aires. And it worked out so well. In fact, he's now COO of our team. He's done such an incredible job. He's grown, so much, and it worked out really well. And we've now expanded our team tremendously. But what I would share is that the process with that, and what I found to be what works really well, is testing out different, individuals that you're hiring. Have at least 3 to 5 people that you are interviewing for that position. Give them almost like a trial period, right? To see if they're a good fit for the team, but also if you're a good fit for them. And then, continue the process, continue adding more responsibilities, or allowing them to grow into that role as time goes on.
Got it. You said something really interesting. You hired somebody for the first time, did not work out, and it was devastating. And what's interesting is, I know you and I have both experienced this, is as we grow our businesses and as we have what we don't call failures, but we call them setbacks, we have these setbacks and we keep going, we're less and less devastated when things go wrong, or the things that are required for us to be devastated subsequently become larger and larger. I remember when I started a business and something small went wrong. At the time, it didn't seem small. Like right now, I'm like, I sort of laugh at, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was so blown away and how I felt like such a failure because of XYZ. And now that wouldn't even register on my radar. Okay, no big deal. Here's how you take care of it and move on. And so I think that's one of the things that a lot of people who are starting businesses should be well aware of is, number one, you're not going to have it figured out on day one. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to hurt. It's either going to hurt on a personal level, emotionally, or it's going to hurt financially, or maybe both. And the thing to realize is you're never as good as people say you are, and you're never as bad as people say you are. Not only that, but we're sometimes our own worst critic, our own worst enemy, because we think we're too good or we think we're not good at all. And so managing that, I think is difficult and takes time to learn. And to your point, having a business coach or having somebody in your corner who's either been through it and who can relate to you and walk you through that and tell you to get off of that ledge is the difference between success and failure. I remember the first time I had come into contact with a business coach. I learned what they charged and other things, and I was like, you know what? I don't need a business coach. Like, why would it, entrepreneur is all about figuring it out yourself. And that was really silly of me to think that, because being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, CEO, whatever you want to call it, a lot of it is about mitigating risk, reducing risk, eliminating variables that can damage your business. And if you know someone or can work with someone who's already crossed that bridge, it would behoove you to not work with them. You know what I mean? And so once you began working with a business coach, talk to me a little bit about what that progression was like.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely. And I agree 1000%. I think that as a business owner, it's so easy for us to get tunnel visioned into our business, right? And the benefit of working with a coach or a mentor like that is that they have this insight that they can foresee problems or pain points or maybe roadblocks that you might not even see yourself. And so having someone that, like you said, that has either been there before or that is just sometimes even just an unbiased perspective is so extremely valuable, because it really does help to keep your business on track. I mean, there's such a difference. We oftentimes talk about the difference between working in the business versus working on the business, right?
Yep.
But having a coach or someone like that is almost another level of working on the business, because it gives you the opportunity to look at maybe best practices or areas that that maybe could create some type of problem in the near future or far future, that, like you said, you can mitigate that risk very easily just by having that person's perspective.
Yep. I'll tell you another mistake that I made was, I would say, look, there's all these YouTube videos out there on how to run a business or what to do and what not to do. But I think the thing that I didn't realize at that point, because I was trying to save money, and it ended up costing me more in the long run because I made, a series of mistakes at every turn. And I just incidentally, I don't make the same mistake twice. I make it like 3 or 4 times before I really, I need to make sure that I commit it to memory. But my point is, it's a lot different when you're just watching a YouTube video and trying to talk yourself through a problem from watching a YouTube video or something similar, versus someone who is side by side, who has intimate knowledge of your particular business challenge and the nuances of it, and can then provide wisdom, insight, potential solutions. And at the end of the day, you may listen to them or you may not listen to them, but that sounding board is so imperative when you're a young business that doesn't have a lot of support, financial support, emotional support, whatever, human capital support, because that tunnel vision does take place more often than people would like to admit. And it's so lonely. It's embarrassing to admit this, but in the early days, so Roosterly's been running since 2015. So when we had 10, 15, 20 clients, and I was really stressed out, having dinner with my wife, and we're sitting at the table, and we don't even have kids at this point. It's just she and I. We're physically in the same room, but she could tell that something was seriously wrong, and she would get freaked out, right? I'd be like literally talking to myself like through calls, like, as if I was on a call, or as if I'm giving a solution. She's like, you're talking out loud right now. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just severely stressed. So instead, if I had an actual person there,
Yeah.
that I could talk. And here's the other mistake people make also is they, and this is actually not funny, it can get quite serious, is they naturally gravitate towards their spouse
Mhm.
and they start telling them their problems. So the challenge that creates is your spouse has a particular role, right? That individual could be the person who takes care of the kids. That could be the person who takes care of the household, or they may have a job and they might work. And they're there as an emotional support for you. You laugh, you joke, you share intimate moments and things like that. But I firmly believe that having the expectation or forcing them to be everything for you
Mhm.
is completely unfair, especially when you're in a demanding role, whether that's CEO, whether that's physician, whether that's attorney, whether that's whatever it is that you do, firefighter, take your pick. And that can put a tremendous strain on the relationship. It can fracture your intimacy, it can fracture your relationship in a multitude of ways. And so if you don't want to have a, and this is, by the way, this is not an ad for a coaching service, but if you don't want a business coach for the sake of helping you with your business, get a business coach so you can at least maintain a basic level of sanity and maintain your relationship. Like, if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your partner, right?
Mhm. Oh my gosh. Yes. I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah. In fact, through the years, I mean, like the first year that I started the agency, my wife was like, I want to help. I want to be involved. And we tried it out for a little bit. She started helping with a couple of the different tasks and a couple of the different things. And honestly, like it wasn't terrible. Like it didn't go that bad, but exactly what you're talking about here, Irfan, is what happened is there was no separation between work and or like the business mindset and then our home life or that relationship, right? And so and I would say too, like, for context on this, I do consider my wife to be one of my best business coaches or whatever, because she's a sounding board for a lot of different things, and she knows what's going on a high level, everything that's going on in the business, and what new big goals we're working towards and things like that. But we had to create a very specific separation between me in the business and doing these things and venting to a business coach about certain things versus going to her about those, right? And it's kind of funny what you're talking about here, where you said, sitting at dinner with your wife and she knows something is going on. I've been there, right? And it's difficult and almost unfair, like you said, right? To have your spouse or your partner be the person that you expect to handle all of those different things that you need, right? So having the separation, it's actually been so much better for us, both in the business and in our relationship, because I know that I can, go to her to talk about things, but it's coming from the perspective of emotional support versus business solution, right? And having that separation, it's refreshing. And my opinion on this is that, your spouse can be such an incredible piece of the business or businesses that you're creating, but there needs to be almost boundaries in place so that it does not affect the other parts or the other relationship aspects that are so important for, your success as well.
I don't think people in general understand the role and how critical it is to be a spouse of a business owner, right? And there are sometimes, this, because they know how you think, they know how you respond to things, and that perspective will just automatically like, oh, you know what, you're right, this is, you're brilliant. And so there's been moments like that where I'm like, gosh, I don't know how I could even move forward if it were not for this person. And it's not necessarily something I vocalize enough. And in fact, I'll be really honest, in the beginning I was almost ashamed that I needed that support. I would think like, I'm the guy, I should be able to figure this out. I don't want to burden her with my problems. And bless her heart, it was just so amazing. Like, her emotional well is so deep that she was able to really provide me with the emotional support that I needed to just make it through that day until we got that next big account. Like, all right, cool. And then what we would do is like, at the time we didn't have a lot of money. So when we did get like a big account, it's not necessarily that it allowed us to hire another employee or anything like that, but we would just literally go to dinner and have a nice dinner at some place, right? And after that, when your business grows and it becomes stable and you're like, oh, dinner's, whatever, just Grubhub whatever you want. But there were days where it was like, oh no, we really need this for the mortgage, or we really, da 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 da. And so just doing that as a treat to yourself and to your spouse, whatever it is, it could be going to the park, taking a trip to Hawaii, whatever it is, sharing that success with them and letting them know that they contributed to that success is really important. I think supremely important. So if anyone's listening to this, take a good look at yourself and what you've done and the people that have contributed to that, and let them know, because otherwise you might run out of people if you need more help and support if you don't acknowledge them, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So as you started growing, did you find that you needed different skills at every stage of growth? How did you sort of like understand that, what, this is something that I'm not familiar with? I can choose to go learn it. I can ask my business coach, or what, I'm just going to delegate this to somebody else. What is that thought process like?
When I rely a lot on the decision-making matrix called the Eisenhower's box. So Eisenhower's box it's something that was introduced to me actually when I was 20 years old. One of those people that I reached out to on LinkedIn was an individual. Her name is Terry Klug, and she was a vice president for a very big company here in Silicon Slopes. And she told me that one of the biggest pieces that affected her success was her understanding of what to say yes to and what to say no to. And she showed me or introduced me to Eisenhower's box. And it's 4 different quadrants, but it's basically, it says, when you have something that you are, on the fence about, or, like you mentioned, how do I delegate this or not? You say, all right, is this urgently important, or can it be done later? And if it's urgently important and it's, something that needs done that moment, then you do it right then that moment. If If it can be done later, you can schedule it out. But then the second question that you ask is this something that I am interested in, that I have passion around? Is it something that brings me joy and makes me feel fulfilled? Or is it something that really doesn't, that I really despise doing? And if it's the prior, then schedule time to, have that on your calendar, schedule time to do that. And I also take it a step further with that. Look at, is it actually worth your time? Like dollar amount, is it worth your time? And if it is, great, do it. If it's not, either delegate it or get rid of it. Say no to it, right? Don't do it. And don't have it even be part of the process.
So incidentally, this is what I really like about you. You've got this internal structure and process and discipline, and you've got, you reference these things so frequently that it becomes a habit. And I think that was something that I didn't have, which is why I admire you for having it. It's like, oh man, how does she do that? She's always so organized. She's always got this sort of internal structure of how to handle curveballs and things like that. It took me a while to learn that. And I thought it was silly to sort of draw it out and make a quadrant, but I do that from time to time. I probably don't do it as much as I should, but that's another thing, is slowing down to speed up, taking a step back and analyzing something properly, giving it the weight it deserves, and sort of like, okay, we're going fast, let's go big or go home. We're just not going to think, and we're just going to plow through that brick wall and fall flat on our back. Versus your approach, we're like, hey, let's sort of think this through, so we don't go bananas, is so important. So is this part of what you train people on and coach people on yourself?
Some of it, yeah, definitely some of it. For the coaching aspect of things, I definitely take a lot of the business principles, right, that exist from, the time of Think and Grow Rich to now, right? They're all similar business principles, but teaching a lot on that, and then more tactical pieces. Like we were talking about at the beginning, Irfan, there's an abundance of motivational accounts on social media that you can go to find motivation and, to find inspiration. And that's great. But sometimes you just need that tactical, like, blueprint, right? So I give a lot of that as well. And that perspective, right? That strategy perspective of looking at, maybe foreseeing what problems could arise from the direction that you're currently heading versus the goals that you're wanting to align with.
Understood. Now, look, this is not something that you need to do. You don't need to go out and help people start an agency or build a business. You've got enough on your plate. You've got a growing family, right? You're growing your business as well. Why do you choose to dedicate time to this? Because this is not necessarily some giant profit center for you either.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I feel so strongly that we are not meant to live this life in mediocrity. And I feel that the society that we live in almost trains and ingrains it into our minds from a very young age through public education, through, really every situation, that we should, settle for mediocrity and stay complacent. And I feel so strongly that an incredible life is not only possible, but it's extremely achievable if you just take that one step into fear, right? And so it's really, it's something that I feel very honored and very blessed to be able to be in the position that I can help others achieve those same things. I oftentimes, think of my own thought processes, even in the corporate world, of thinking like, one day I want to have something better. I know there's something better out there for me. I just don't know what it is, and I just don't know yet how to achieve that. And for a lot of individuals, they have that thought process. They just don't know what those missing pieces are. And so if I can, like, honestly, if I can help even just a few people fill in those missing gaps to achieve an incredible life for themselves, I feel like that is more, more payment than any monetary amount could ever amount to.
Beautifully said. And you know what's interesting is it sounds so cliche to say, if I could just help one student, if I could just help one person, but it's actually true. And the reason why, I think, is because when you give of yourself, when you teach somebody or coach somebody, or when you train someone, things that you already know, you end up, it comes back full circle, because you'll realize something about what you just taught that person, and you'll be better at what you do. I don't know if I'm articulating that in the best way,
Yes.
but it's funny, when you give of yourself, you always get more back. And the weird thing is, and like, look, we're both on social media, we're both, we see what's out there. There's good stuff, there's bad stuff, there's a lot of hyperbolic stuff. But when you find that coach or that individual that you identify with and relate to, there's a connection there, right? And so what I would say to people, and you may back me up on this, is not every coach is necessarily right for you, right? I've met coaches where I was just opposed to their worldview, and I was like, okay, that person's teaching something that seems very selfish, or I just, this person's the coach, but if you take a look at their life, and how they interact and behave with others, or what they talk about, it might be right for somebody else. I'm not saying it's wrong, but gosh, I can't work with them. Talk to me about the students that you think that you serve the best, or who's your ideal coaching client. It's a very roundabout way of asking that.
Yeah, I think that there is one attribute that sets all the others apart, and it's your willingness to be committed.
Okay.
Like, that's it, right? It's your willingness to just move forward, right? In the face of uncertainty, in the face of fear, in the face of these things. I love working with individuals who are passionate about what it is they want to accomplish and are willing to put in the work, right? Because like you said, I think you shared the statistic that the majority of businesses will fail in the first year, especially in the first, 3 years or 5 years, majority will fail. And the reason that those businesses oftentimes fail, it's actually not, in a lot of cases, it's not due to their product not doing, the best, or their service not being the best out there. It's due to their inability or their unwillingness to grow into who they need to be to deserve their business growing. Right. And I think that we, as individuals, we oftentimes, we're really taught that when those scary feelings come up, or when we feel anxious about moving forward in something, that we should just go find comfort and stop, move away from that fear. And so I would say the ideal individuals that I absolutely love working with are those who are more committed to what their outcome goal is than they are worried about, existing in fear, existing in those uncertain times.
Really good point. Gosh, how much of that fear do you think is rooted in what someone thinks another person might think about them if they were to act a certain way or start a business or any of those things? Like, so for my own example, I was terrified about doing a podcast. I was terrified about being on, I don't know if terrified, but it was just not my favorite thing, the idea of producing video content, because I'd seen so many folks out there who's like, gosh, I don't know how I feel about that. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that, in my mind, that's imposter syndrome, right? And I do feel that a large majority of the fear that we experience is from that. I know that for myself, that's something that I've dealt with a lot. At every new level of success, there's a new level of imposter syndrome. And I think that it's one of those things that will always exist on some level. And instead of, thinking like, oh, this is a bad thing, or this is something that I need to get rid of, or whatever, just look at it as something that you can allow to trigger yourself, like it's a sign that this means I should move forward. If I'm worried about what people are going to think of how crazy this is, good, that means that it's something I'm supposed to be doing, right? Because and this is something that like I've really had to reframe my mind around, because yeah, just just with a lot of things that have happened over the years. But it's almost like you have to put on these blinders and stay focused on what it is you want to achieve. And who cares what anybody else thinks? Because at the end of the day, they are not the person that is going to be there at that end goal with you, right? They are not the person that is going to help you get there. You are, right? And so it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, as long as it is in alignment with what your goals are.
That is so insightful. That is so wise. And I feel it's so easy to lose sight of that. It's almost like when you wake up in the morning, you've got to tell yourself that. As cheesy as that sounds, there's some folks who respond well to affirmations, and maybe there's others that don't. But what you just said, I think, is so critical, because in the beginning of starting our respective businesses, we had so much doubt whether it was the right thing to do. We were scared about making enough money and all these other things. And then, so that required us to be in that, and I don't like to use this phrase, it's right up there with my other favorite phrase, authentic. But the phrase that I'm talking about is mindset, right? Mindset is thrown around so often. But once we get into the mindset that, gosh, we have to stay focused, it's going to be us at the end of the day who's answerable to ourselves. It's not going to be anybody else. Once we achieve a certain level of success, like, whether it's hitting 10,000 a month or 20,000 or 50,000 a month, internally, there is a tendency for people to become complacent and lose sense of that, right? When my business got up to a certain level of clients, a certain volume of revenue, I thought, you know what? Do I really need to do a podcast? Do I really need to do, social media video content? Like, aren't I above that? And that, unfortunately, the answer to that is no. I learned that the hard way, because you see other people who are really leapfrogging you, and it's a very arrogant mindset. And if you allow yourself to stay in that mindset, sooner or later, it's going to bite you and it's going to hurt. Did you yourself experience anything like that? And how did you deal with it?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, even as an example, recently, earlier this year, the team has grown quite a bit. We're doing really well. But I had a moment where I realized, man, I'm getting complacent. I'm getting too comfortable. And it was almost this thought of like, I'm so comfortable right now that it's making me feel uncomfortable, right? Because what's the phrase that if we're not growing, we're dying, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really this realization moment for me of, I cannot allow myself to get comfortable. And really, what's been helpful for me is really remembering where I started, remembering how I felt when I was just starting out, and really, allowing myself to anchor onto those feelings, and really that kind of burn the ship mentality of, there's no other choice but to succeed. There's no other choice but to move forward and think bigger and achieve more, right? And with that being said, I think it's very important to, pause between achievements and celebrate and take time to celebrate those wins, but keeping your mind focused on, continuously progressing. I definitely, recently within this last year, have experienced that of realizing, I've got to be committed every single day to growing and to putting in the work and doing activities on a daily basis that will move the needle forward.
Wow. One of the things that strikes me is that you're very intentional, you're very deliberate, you really think things through. We talk a lot about inspiration and motivation and how we stay driven, right? But can you share with me a little bit about whether or not you've been burned out and how you handled that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, burnout is real. One of the areas that has helped me the most with navigating this is having a business coach that can help to, foresee that and help to balance things a little bit so that that's not happening. I have had a shift in my thought process around work-life balance and around burnout over the years, especially when I was first starting out. I tried to be very intentional about that work-life balance of separating them, right? And now I would say now that has evolved into being something where they both work seamlessly together. And I think that with burnout, when we're looking at that, it's something that our capacity can expand if we continue working on, strengthening that. It's kind of like strengthening a muscle, right? That our capacity can expand as we are learning and growing and evolving. But for me personally, it's really been acknowledging and understanding the things that will allow me personally to recharge and making sure that those are a regular part of what I'm doing so that I don't get to a point where I'm just completely burnt out. And that's easier said than done. Absolutely. But whenever I start to feel myself getting burnt out or getting to that point of just being completely exhausted, I will take, sometimes just take a day and cancel all of the meetings and cancel everything that we're doing and just go spend the day with my wife or go spend the day with, our little family and take the kiddo to the zoo or do something, that makes me feel recharged. And I think that oftentimes it's hard for us to say like, okay, I'm going to do this for myself, right? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we're innately people pleasers and we want to serve everybody else around us. But sometimes it is going to give more value to those around you if you take a step back and do something for yourself rather than continuing to try to pour out of an empty cup.
Yeah, without feeling guilty about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So a few more rapid fire questions that I'd love to get your insight on. How do you incorporate purpose into your work? And this might sound like a rhetorical question.
Purpose, yes. For me, my purpose is really around my ability to impact others through the example of, what it takes to have an incredible life and showing through that example that it's, like I said, not only possible, but it's very achievable. And so for me, integrating that purpose into everything every single day, I feel that I'm able to do that in even the conversations that I get to have with my team for the, within the agency and building up a team and a company culture that is designed to help those team members have a great life and, not have work be the only thing that they're doing with their life. But also too, on the aspect of, the students and the individuals that I get to coach every single day, helping to, show them or provide perspectives of ways to help them achieve their achieve their success, I feel really fulfills that level of purpose for me.
Got it. Got it. And you know what's interesting is different individuals define incredible life differently, right?
Right.
It might be how I might describe incredible or great or fantastic, choose your adjective, might be very different from how you describe it. Can you talk to me about what you mean when you say teaching others how to live an incredible life?
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad that you said that too, because oftentimes what I'll say is, your version of success. Because for that same reason, my version of success or my version of, an ideal life is going to be a lot different from, the next person down, or, those on the left or the right of me. And so I think that that's one of the first steps in achieving something more is first taking a moment to write down and get really clear on what that looks like for you.
Okay.
And also giving yourself grace in saying that this is what an incredible life looks for me right now. But in a year, 3 years, 5 years, I'm going to do this exercise again because it might look completely different.
Wow. It's so interesting. The more I listen to you, the more I talk to you, I find that a lot of your practical knowledge is really focused around writing things down, being deliberate, setting goals, having the right attitude, mindset, those kinds of things. But you have a way of delivering it in such a simple, no nonsense way. And I think that's at least what with me is what resonates. So thank you for that. Follow up to that. What do you see for yourself in the next 12 to 24 months, personally and professionally?
Yes, 12 to 24 months. So 1 to 2 years. One of the top priorities is growing TRC. We have some pretty audacious goals for growing our company, the clients that we're serving, and keeping a pretty lean team so that we can all have, the maybe level of financial financial life that we want to have. In terms of personally, our family is growing quite a bit, and my wife and I are, looking at in the next, 1 to 2 years, building our generational wealth. So through real estate investing, actually.
Really? Okay. So divesting from simply focusing on your agency to generating multiple income streams from other sources and just having the wherewithal to say, you know what, just because I know my digital agency work doesn't mean that I can't go out and learn a new skill. And I'm guessing one of the components to that is almost kind of replacing yourself at TRC so you can, build and grow TRC, but also have something else that allows you sort of that generational wealth. Is that right? I don't know if I communicated that in the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I think that, there's a phrase and I don't even know who said it, but it says, become a leader who creates leaders. And that's what I really, strive for, because for multiple reasons, right? It helps others to grow and evolve, but also too will allow me eventually to step out and to focus on other things.
Very cool. What keeps you up at night? It can't be your kids.
Yeah, I was gonna say my 3-year-old. No, I really love my sleep, and so not a lot actually. But I know that that's, kind of a analogy almost sometimes to in terms of what keeps me up at night. I would say, with the business, my risk tolerance is very high, which is a lot of times a good thing, but a lot of times not a good thing. And so there have been many times that I will take a pretty big risk in growing the company. And in those moments when we are in that build mode or that build phase, it is very stressful. And so, I would say that 9 times out of 10, the things that are keeping me up at night are how to look at all of the potential outcomes that maybe a risky decision might cause, and how, how we would navigate every single one of those scenarios.
Wow. Okay. Yep. That makes total sense. And I can completely relate.
Yeah.
Can you recommend a book that has had an impact on your life, and that one that you would recommend to others as a result?
Yes, definitely. One that, so I'd say one that I love probably the most, and I read it pretty often, is called The 12-Week Year. And it's a short book, so you can listen to it pretty quickly or read it pretty quickly. But it really helped me reframe the way that I look at approaching projects or goals or things that I want to achieve. And it's the idea that you can achieve as much as someone does in multiple years. You can achieve that in a matter of months if you follow this specific framework. And so I love that. And I've actually applied it to pretty much everything I do. The other one that I would say that has really made a big impact for me is actually a book that was written by a friend of mine, Jeff Lerner. And it's a book called Unlock Your Potential. So Unlock Your Potential, that's an incredible book because he walks through a lot of the different pieces that it takes to become not only a more aware individual, but also a better entrepreneur, a better business owner. And so that's one that has definitely made a big impact for me.
I haven't checked out Jeff's book. I will, but in the short time that I've been connected with him, and I don't know him on a personal level, he certainly has the credentials to be able to talk about that topic because he's done very well for himself. And separately, his energy and the content that I've seen on LinkedIn that he's producing, I even made a video about it, is really grounded in solid foundational information, right? So definitely worth checking out Jeff and his book and other things. What was the name of the first book that you mentioned?
The 12-Week Year.
12-Week Year. Okay. And you implemented the strategies in that book, and you've seen it play out in a positive way?
Okay. Oh, 1,000.
Right. So guys, if Hilary recommends a book, do yourself a favor and pick it up because she's good at what she does. Clearly, I'm waiting for you to write your book. So before we adjourn, who's your ideal client? Who are you looking to network with?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you so much too. This has been such a fun conversation. For me personally, I would say, so I do business coaching and I also have a marketing agency. So I'll speak maybe to both of those. On the coaching side, if you are a business owner who has either been running a business for multiple years, or you have an idea of a business that you want to start and you're not quite sure how to step into that or how to grow your current business, that's, best case scenario, you and I get on a call together and see if we would, be a good fit in working together and helping you to achieve those goals. For the agency, we're not limited in terms of industry. We work with lots of different industries and businesses of lots of different sizes. We do work in terms of helping to grow your business through what we call a forecastable lead system. So we create a very specific offer and help you drive traffic through that offer to grow your business and fill up the calendar, fill up your, client calls and get your company busy.
I love it. Hilary, thank you so much. I hope we get to talk again soon. I hope we get to meet up in person soon.
Yes, definitely.
All right. We'll talk again soon. All right.
Okay. Thank you.